Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going deep with Amber Ray's Choose Wonder Over Worry.
Oh, yeah, this one's great.
I'm already feeling inspired, and we haven't even started yet. So you recommended this one, right? The audiobook.
Yeah, choose wonder over worry. Definitely a favorite. I think it's full of, well, wisdom for anyone who's ever struggled with self-doubt or just like wants to level up their life.
Totally. And it seems like Ray's been through it all: entrepreneurial failures, relationship drama, even addiction.
Right, and she's really open about those experiences.
Yeah, that's what makes it so relatable, I think. Like right off the bat, she talks about this intense time with her Bold Academy program. So picture this. She's dealing with financial struggles, has these hidden feelings for her co-founder, and then bam, they run out of money mid-program.
Wow.
Total disaster, right? And she's hit with this massive wave of shame, like feeling like a complete failure.
Oh, I can only imagine.
It's so raw and honest. Have you ever felt that way? Like you make a mistake and suddenly you're questioning your whole worth as a person.
All the time. I think most people have, right? It's easy to personalize those setbacks.
Exactly. And Ray brings in Brene Brown's research on shame resilience, which I found really helpful. Brown talks about differentiating I am bad from I did something bad. It was subtle, but wow, what a difference in perspective.
Huge. It's that shift from attacking your whole self to focusing on the specific action. It can really change how you view those tough moments.
Absolutely. But okay, how do we actually apply that in real life? Like when that shame spiral hits, what do we do?
That's the million-dollar question. Well, Ray actually had this incredibly vulnerable conversation with her co-founder years after that whole Bold Academy
Oh,
thing.
wow.
Yeah, and it really highlights the power of open communication for dissolving shame. They didn't shy away from the hard stuff, and it actually helped rebuild their relationship.
Okay, that's huge. Like we don't have to suffer in silence, right? There's power in vulnerability and talking it out.
Exactly. And, speaking of belonging, Ray's next challenge, well, it really tested her sense of self-worth in a whole different way. She was in this relationship with a guy, Jordan, and he actually said, "I love you," but then, get this, he said he couldn't say it again.
Oh no.
Yeah, brutal. It left her feeling, well, totally unlovable, like she wasn't worthy of that love.
It makes you think, right? Like, can we ever truly belong if we let someone else define the terms of our worthiness?
Such a good point. And Ray eventually realized that belonging to herself first was essential for any healthy relationship. Does that resonate with you?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, think about all the times we compromise our own needs or values just to fit in or please someone else.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall into that trap. And Ray's later relationship with Farhad, it really drives home that point. She had the self-confidence to advocate for love, to have those difficult conversations about its importance in the relationship.
It's like she learned to set boundaries and communicate her needs without that fear of rejection. Speaking of rejection, haven't we all been there? Ray tells a story about an artist who reached out to her totally defeated after, you guessed it, a rejection.
Oh, yeah, I remember that part. And I love how Ray responds.
What'd she say?
She's like, look, rejection is often about fit, not personal worth. And she even brings up Paulo Coelho getting over 200 rejections before The Alchemist was published.
Wow, if he can handle that.
Right. It's like if he can handle that, we can handle anything. So what about you? Have you ever faced a major setback and had to like really dig deep to keep going?
Oh, so many times. I think that's part of any creative journey, isn't it? Those setbacks, they test your resilience, your self-belief. It makes me think of Malala Yousafzai and everything she went through.
Yeah. Talk about resilience.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And what's really cool is that Ray actually shares her own experience with book rejection. Imagine pouring your heart into something and then getting like harsh feedback. That's gotta sting.
Ouch. Yeah. She must have been crushed.
Totally. And she felt that initial anger, which is so natural, but then she chose to see it as a mismatched fit. And get this, instead of giving up, she sent out 32 more proposals.
Wow. 32.
32, and finally found the right agent. Talk about persistence.
Okay, that's incredible. All right, next up, Ray dives into this really relatable experience about a gallery show. So picture this. She's being featured alongside big names like Banksy and Shepard Fairey.
Seriously?
Yeah, but instead of being excited, she's totally crippled by self-doubt. It's like even surrounded by success, that inner critic can be so loud.
The imposter syndrome, right? It never really goes away, does it?
It's crazy. Have you ever felt that creeping in? Like you achieve something amazing and you're still like, wait, am I a fraud?
Oh, for sure. It's like this constant battle. But Ray brings up this concept from Tara Brach that I found really helpful. It's called inviting Mara for tea.
inviting Mara for tea.
Yeah, Mara's like this Buddhist representation of fear and self-doubt, and instead of pushing those emotions away, the idea is to like befriend them.
Okay, that's interesting. But how do we actually befriend our fear? Like, what does that look like in practice?
Well, Ray took her fears and turned them into art. She literally painted her doubts onto a photo, and those words became the theme of her whole exhibition.
Wow, I love that. Turning those negative thoughts into something powerful and creative.
Right. And it makes me think about how, often judgment reflects our own internal struggles. Like, if we're constantly criticizing others, maybe it's because we're harboring those same insecurities within
That's
ourselves.
such a good point. It's like that judgment is really a reflection of ourselves.
Exactly. It reminds me of that Carl Jung quote, something like, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves.
So true. Okay, things get a little spicy when Ree shares this story about, well, finding messages between Farhad and his ex.
Oh,
Yeah. And it triggers some serious jealousy. I think we can all relate to those feelings of insecurity in relationships, right? Like that fear of losing someone we love.
it's primal, isn't it? But Ray actually differentiates jealousy from envy, which I thought was interesting. She says jealousy often stems from a feel of losing something we already have, while envy is more about wanting something someone else has.
Hmm, that's a good distinction.
Right. So could jealousy actually be an opportunity for growth
Hmm.
rather than just drama?
Now that's a fascinating perspective. And Ray, instead of reacting with anger, she chose to have this really vulnerable conversation with Farhad. They talked about their past, their insecurities, and guess what? They actually built a deeper connection. Wow, who knew jealousy could be so productive?
Right. It's about turning towards each other, even when it's uncomfortable, and communicating honestly and with empathy.
Totally. But okay, let's be real. Those conversations aren't always easy.
Oh, definitely not. Sometimes they can get heated.
Tell me about it. And speaking of heated, Ray has this intense encounter with this guy named Rich, who basically badgers her to write about his company.
Really?
Yeah. And when she ignores him, he publicly shames her for her email etiquette. Talk about a boundary violation.
Yikes. Not cool.
Not cool at all. And this is where Ray's exploration of anger gets really insightful. She sees anger not as something to be repressed, but as a signal, a call to action. It's about recognizing that anger often points to a need that's not being met.
Okay, I like that. So it's information, not just something to be afraid of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so instead of just stewing in that anger, she uses this thing called nonviolent communication to write this really powerful email to Rich, asserting her boundaries.
Oh, I've heard of that, but could you remind me what nonviolent communication actually is?
Yeah, so it's a way of communicating that focuses on expressing your needs and feelings clearly and respectfully, but without like blame or judgment.
Okay, so it's about finding a way to connect with the other person, even when you disagree.
Exactly. And Ray, well, she does this masterfully in that email to Rich. Now, Ray also tackles a topic that, well, can be a little controversial.
Hmm.
It's this idea of suffering as a prerequisite for creativity.
Interesting.
Yeah. She talks about this musician who only dates women he knows will hurt him because he believes that pain fuels his music.
Wow.
And then there's Celine, the designer, who basically equates suffering with productivity. Like she rejects projects that feel joyful because she thinks they won't be good enough.
It's almost like they've bought into this romanticized idea of the tortured artist, right? Like you have to be miserable to create something meaningful.
Right. But Ray challenges this notion. She's like, look, while discomfort and challenges are part of growth, we don't have to actively seek out pain.
Yeah, there's got to be a balance, right?
Totally. And she shares Jeff Goins' story. This guy built a successful business, realized he was totally miserable running it, and then found joy in scaling back.
I mean, that makes so much sense.
Right. It's a good reminder that we can choose joy without sacrificing our ambition.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, do you believe that suffering is necessary for creativity? Or can we achieve great things while also, experiencing joy and fulfillment?
That's a question I'm definitely pondering. And speaking of joy and fulfillment, Ray gets really personal talking about fading desire in her relationship with Farhad.
Oh, this is getting juicy.
Yeah. She meets this guy, Sebastian, who basically awakens a dormant desire in her, and it leads to all this guilt and internal conflict.
That's a tough situation. So many people have probably been there, but don't talk about it.
Right. And it's tricky, especially with, all the societal shame that often surrounds female sexuality and desire.
For sure. We're not really taught how to navigate that stuff in a healthy way.
And Ray, she does something amazing. Instead of avoiding the issue, she chooses to have this totally transparent conversation with Farhad.
Wow.
Yeah, sharing her feelings and experience with Sebastian. It's such a powerful example of how honesty, even when it's scary, can lead to more authentic and fulfilling relationships.
Choosing vulnerability over secrecy, even when it feels risky.
Absolutely. And Ray's story shows that sometimes facing that difficult truth can actually lead to a deeper connection. But let's be real, it's not always easy.
Oh, definitely not. And then there's that feeling we all know too well, overwhelm.
Ugh. Yeah, that feeling of having a million things on your plate and not knowing where to start.
Never-ending to-do list.
Right. And Ray shares messages from this entrepreneur and a traveling writer, both feeling the pressure of pursuing their dreams. And she introduces this concept of Aikido.
Aikido.
Yeah, it's a martial art, but she uses it as a metaphor for meeting chaos with calmness and centeredness.
Interesting. So it's not about like fighting the chaos, but more about moving with it.
Exactly. She describes the Aikido black belt test where you face multiple attackers,
Hmm.
and the key is to stay grounded and address challenges one at a time, not letting yourself get overwhelmed by everything at once.
Okay, that's a cool metaphor.
Yeah.
But how do we apply this meeting chaos with calmness idea in our own lives?
Right. I mean, is it about prioritizing tasks, setting boundaries, or just taking a mindful pause when things get crazy?
Yeah, all of that. It's about recognizing that those ebbs and flows, they're part of the journey. Discomfort, it doesn't equal defeat. And Ray encourages us to find our inner stillness amidst the chaos, which, is easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. Especially in today's world, right? It's like go, go, go all the time.
Relentless. Okay, but speaking of chaos, let's talk about, well, anxiety.
Ugh. Yeah, we've all been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The racing thoughts, the physical symptoms, that feeling of being completely out of control.
It's the worst.
And Ray, she paints such a vivid picture of what anxiety feels like. But then she shifts the perspective.
How so?
She suggests that anxiety is actually a messenger, a signal that something is out of alignment.
Instead of something to be feared, it's something to understand.
Exactly. It's not something to eliminate, but to listen to.
So what does that look like? How do we listen to our anxiety?
Well, Ray offers some practical tips, like using a mantra to calm the mind, writing down those anxious thoughts to reduce their power.
Oh, I like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And even, get this, scheduling time to intentionally listen to those thoughts and try to uncover their message.
Okay, that's a new one for me. Scheduling time for anxiety.
I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but I think it's about like acknowledging those feelings, giving them space, rather than trying to push them away.
Yeah, like, okay, anxiety, what are you trying to tell me?
Exactly. So what resonates with you from those suggestions?
I think the writing one really speaks to me. There's something about putting those thoughts on paper that just it helps me get them out of my head.
Me too. And finally, Ray tackles the topic of loss. She talks about the unexpected loss of a book project and her initial attempts to, like, brush it off and move on quickly.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. But it wasn't that easy, huh?
Nope. She realized that unprocessed grief was actually blocking her creativity, like she was carrying around this invisible weight.
Loss is such a universal experience, and we're often told to just, get over it. But true healing takes time.
It does. And Ray talks about the importance of having supportive people who can just hold space for our pain, who can listen without judgment.
That's so important to feel seen and heard in those moments.
Right. To not feel like you have to pretend to be okay.
And Ray's message about the transformative power of grief is so powerful. It's like once we process it, that pain can actually become a source of creative energy. She shows us how to turn our pain into purpose.
That's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. Okay, so Ray ends this part of the book on this incredibly personal note, sharing her struggle with addiction.
Yeah, pretty heavy stuff, but so important.
Definitely. She describes her seemingly perfect life in college, masking this battle with eating disorders, alcohol abuse, and even a near-fatal experience with Adderall. It's a stark reminder that addiction can affect anyone, regardless of their outward appearance, their achievements, or their background.
It's a human struggle, not a moral failing.
Exactly. And Ray's journey to recovery, it shows the incredible power of seeking help. She doesn't pretend it's easy, but she emphasizes that healing is possible. It's a message of hope for anyone who feels, trapped by their own struggles.
Totally. And it's clear that Ray's journey to choosing wonder, it wasn't easy,
No, not at all.
but it's filled with valuable lessons and insights. By sharing her experiences with such honesty and vulnerability, it's like she gives us permission to face our own fears, embrace our imperfections, and ultimately choose a life that's driven by, well, wonder.
This deep dive, I think we've only scratched the surface of all the wisdom in Ray's book. There's so much more to unpack, so many personal experiences and practical
Oh,
strategies.
yeah, we're just getting started. And there's this one final piece of Ray's story in this section. I think it deserves its own exploration.
Mm.
It's really powerful about how even in the darkest of times, we can find hope and healing.
Oh, I'm intrigued. You're going to have to tell me more about that.
Definitely. You'll have to wait for part two.
In part one, we talked about how Amber Ray bravely shared her struggles with shame, heartbreak, and even that near fatal experience with Adderall.
Definitely a powerful story.
Yeah. And what's really impactful is how she connects this incredibly personal story of addiction to this broader conversation about control, trauma, and the importance of seeking help.
That's a heavy topic, but so important to talk about.
Oh, absolutely. And Ray, she doesn't hold back on the details, which I think makes her story all the more impactful.
Right. Like, remember how she talked about how her addiction actually began in college when everything looked perfect from the outside? She was excelling in her studies, had a seemingly great relationship, even landed an internship with Apple.
It's like the classic case of having it all but still feeling deeply unfulfilled.
Exactly. And yet, beneath the surface, she was struggling.
Yeah, she describes this cycle of intense studying all day, drinking all night, and then using laxatives and eventually Adderall to try and cope with the immense pressure she was putting on herself.
It's like she was trying to control every aspect of her life. Her grades, her body, her image.
Right, and when things started to spiral, she turned to substances to numb the pain and maintain that illusion of control.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Have
Yeah.
you ever felt that pull toward control? That need to, like, manage everything?
I think it's a really common human experience, especially in a culture that often prizes achievement above all else.
That's a good point. And Ray's story, it really highlights a crucial point about addiction. It's often a coping mechanism, a way to deal with, well, underlying pain or trauma.
Right. It's not the problem itself, but a symptom of something deeper.
Exactly. And she connects her addictive behaviors to her difficult relationship with her stepfather, explaining how this led her to seek, external means to try to manage her life.
It's a reminder that addiction isn't a sign of weakness, but often a symptom of deeper struggles.
Totally. Do you think Ray's vulnerability in sharing her story helps to, like, destigmatize addiction and encourage those who might be struggling to seek help?
Oh, absolutely. Her honesty is incredibly powerful. And what's more, she doesn't glamorize her addiction at all.
That's important.
Yeah. She talks about the dark side, the shame, the secrecy, and ultimately that terrifying moment when her Adderall abuse nearly cost her her life.
It's a wake-up call, not just for those who might be struggling, but also for anyone who might be judging those who are.
Exactly. Addiction, it can affect anyone, regardless of background, accomplishments, outward appearances.
It's a human struggle, not a moral failing.
Right. And Ray's journey to recovery, it shows the incredible power of seeking help. She's pretend it's easy, but she emphasizes that healing is possible.
It's a message of hope, for sure.
Definitely. And what really strikes me is how Ray connects her recovery from addiction back to this idea of choosing wonder. She talks about it as a lifelong practice.
A commitment to showing up for yourself even when it's hard.
Exactly. It's about self-compassion, recognizing that we're all, works in progress.
And accepting that those setbacks and challenges, they're inevitable.
Right. Nobody's perfect.
So I'm curious, what does that lifelong practice of choosing wonder look like for you?
That's a great question. And I think it's different for everyone.
For sure.
For me, it's about trying to, approach each day with a sense of curiosity and openness, even when things feel challenging.
I like that.
It's about, noticing the small wonders that often get overlooked in the midst of our busy lives.
And Ray, she offers a whole toolkit of strategies for navigating life's inevitable ups and downs.
Oh, yeah.
From mindfulness and journaling to having those tough conversations, setting boundaries,
Right. It's not about pretending everything's perfect.
but about, like, equipping ourselves to deal with the messy realities of being human.
Exactly. And what I appreciate is how Ray doesn't just focus on, overcoming those big obstacles. She also emphasizes finding wonder in the everyday moments.
In the small joys, the connections we make with others.
Yes. It's about shifting our perspective, choosing to see the beauty that's already present in our lives.
It's like training our brains to focus on the good stuff.
Right. And Ray, she beautifully weaves together her personal experiences with, insights from psychology, spirituality, even martial arts.
It's like she's created this tapestry of wisdom, drawing from all these different sources to offer a really holistic approach to personal growth.
I think that's why her work resonates with so many people. It's not just self-help fluff, it's grounded in real-life experience and backed by research.
In her writing style, it's so engaging and relatable. It feels like you're having a conversation with a friend, not being lectured to.
Right. She tackles the hard stuff, but with this sense of like hope and optimism that's really contagious.
I agree.
So far, we've explored Ray's struggles with shame, heartbreak, addiction, and her strategies for navigating those tough emotions.
Yeah, a lot of heavy stuff.
But what I'm really curious about is how she applies these principles in her own life, in the day-to-day. What does choosing wonder look like when it's not about, overcoming some major obstacle, but about just showing up for the ordinary moments?
That's a fantastic question. It's so easy to get caught up in striving for future happiness that we forget to appreciate the present moment.
So true. So how does Ray find wonder in the mundane?
Well, that's where I think the final part of this deep dive gets really interesting.
Mm.
We're going to explore Ray's practices for cultivating joy, finding meaning in the everyday, and turning even the most ordinary moments into opportunities for, growth and connection.
Okay, you've definitely piqued my interest. Can't wait to uncover those everyday wonders in part 3.
We've journeyed with Amber Ray through, wow, some pretty intense experiences,
Mm.
facing failure, heartbreak, and even addiction. But, what's inspiring is how she brings it all back to this idea of choosing wonder, even in the everyday.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, but how do we find that sparkle when life isn't about conquering some huge obstacle, when it's just about like showing up for the ordinary moments?
Exactly. So how does she actually cultivate wonder in the midst of, well, the mundane? What are some tangible things she does?
Well, one of the key things Ray emphasizes is the power of, well, just presence.
Being present in the moment.
Yeah. It's about paying attention to the small details, the simple pleasures we often miss.
The stuff we take for granted.
Totally. Like savoring a delicious meal, appreciating a beautiful sunset, or even just taking a walk in nature. It's about slowing down and really experiencing the world around us.
It sounds so simple,
It is.
but I know I'm totally guilty of rushing through life sometimes, missing those little moments.
Oh, me too.
What about you? Do you have any practices that help you stay present?
Yeah, actually, Ray talks about unplugging from technology, which is a big one for me.
Taking a break from the screen?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And creating dedicated time for stillness.
So like meditation, journaling, being in nature.
Exactly. It helps me reconnect with myself, like hitting the reset button on my nervous system.
I love that. And Ray also talks about, well, the power of gratitude.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Shifting our focus from what we lack to what we have,
Right.
from what's wrong to what's right. Have you found that, gratitude practices make a difference in your life?
Absolutely. I mean, research even shows that gratitude can actually rewire our brains.
Really?
Yeah, to be more positive and resilient.
Wow.
And Ray suggests things like, keeping a gratitude journal.
Where you write down things you're thankful for.
Exactly. Or just taking a moment each morning to reflect on the good stuff in your life.
And it's not just about the big things, right?
Mm.
Like our health or our loved ones.
Right.
Ray says we can find gratitude in the smallest things. A warm cup of coffee, a funny text from a friend, even just moment of unexpected beauty.
It's like training ourselves to see the wonder that's already all around us.
Yeah. And it doesn't stop there. Ray also talks about the importance of connection.
Oh, yeah. Human connection is everything.
She believes that surrounding ourselves with people who support us, inspire us, challenge us, it's crucial.
You're trying.
Yeah. And it's about quality, not just quantity, right?
Yeah.
Like investing in those relationships that truly matter.
Totally. Those people who lift you up, make you feel seen and understood.
Yeah, the ones you can be yourself around.
Exactly. And Ray encourages making time for those meaningful conversations, showing up for our loved ones in authentic ways, and also, finding your tribe.
Connecting with people who share your values.
Yes. Your passions, your vision for the world.
It's about seeking communities where you feel like you belong.
Belonging is so important.
It is. And it's not just about connecting with others, but also, connecting with ourselves.
Self-love.
Ray emphasizes self-care, listening to our bodies, honoring our needs, prioritizing our well-being. It's about being our own best friend.
Treating yourself with kindness.
Exactly. And she talks about the importance of movement, finding ways to move our bodies that feel joyful and energizing.
Like dancing or yoga.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hiking, or even just taking a walk in the park. It's about finding what feels good for you.
And of course, rest is crucial too.
Oh, absolutely. giving ourselves permission to slow down, recharge, and nourish ourselves.
It's like filling our own cup so we can, show up fully for ourselves and others.
Love that analogy. And Ray also highlights, mental and emotional self-care, being mindful of our thoughts, challenging that negative
And
self-talk.
quieting that inner critic.
Yeah, and cultivating a more compassionate inner voice.
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would offer to a loved one.
So important. Okay, so we've talked about presence, gratitude, connection, and self-care. These are all powerful practices for, well, cultivating joy and wonder in the everyday. But there's one final piece that I think ties it all together:
What's that?
purpose.
Ah,
Ray believes that we all have this unique contribution to make to the world.
that we each have gifts and talents meant to be shared.
Exactly. And she encourages us to explore our passions, to discover what lights us up, and to find ways to use our gifts to make a positive impact.
To leave the world a little bit better than we found it.
Yeah. So what does purpose look like for you?
Hmm. That's a good question. For me, I think purpose is about aligning my actions with my values.
Walking the walk.
Yeah, it's about using my skills and knowledge to make a difference, however small, in the lives of others.
And Ray reminds us that purpose doesn't have to be this grand, world-changing mission.
Right. It can be found in the simplest of things, like, showing up for our loved ones, being kind to strangers, or just bringing creativity to our work
It's about living a life that feels meaningful.
and true to ourselves.
So there you have it. That's Amber Ray's Choose Wonder Over Worry.
A journey of self-discovery, of facing fears, embracing imperfections, and ultimately choosing a life filled with joy, connection, and purpose.
It's a reminder that wonder isn't something we find, it's something we create.
A choice we make each and every day.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
What one small step can you take today to choose wonder in your own life?
What can you do to cultivate presence, gratitude, connection, self-care, or purpose? It doesn't have to be anything big or dramatic, just a small act of intention that moves you closer to a more joyful and fulfilling life.
And if Ray's story has resonated with you, I definitely encourage you to explore her work further.
Her website, her books, her social media, it's all filled with inspiration, wisdom, and practical tools for living a more wonder-filled life.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Keep choosing wonder.